Hey guys, this is a few months later. I was still working for the same company. Bob was still the manager at the gas station, and I was the admin assistant at the auto parts store and garage. And at the store, at the auto parts store, we also had a cashier. She was a single mom with two daughters, aged 10 and 13. I got along well with her from the day we hired her, and we were just on the same wavelength, and we could talk about anything. Just be ourselves with each other. And so one Monday morning, we were at work, of course. She came to me and asked for a private conversation. In that conversation, she told me that her younger daughter had spent the weekend away with her youth club or youth group. When her daughter came back the night before, which was Sunday night, her voice was gone. And so was the voice of all of her friends that had spent the weekend with her. This is what had happened. The youth club had rented a house in a beautiful setting in the region, about 30 minutes away from the city we live in. It was a former, now I don't know the English word for it. When I looked it up, it said rectory. It's a house where a minister was living. It was right next to a church. The girls were, so that youth club rented the house. Yeah, they rented the house, and so the whole group went hiking. They were playing games outside, just having a good time. Then Saturday night, the girls were told to go to their rooms and get ready for bed. They were having all kinds of fun, having pillow fights and all that kind of stuff. They were unpacking their blankets, their pillows and everything, and some snacks maybe. And they were fixing their beds. It was bunk beds, like in those, places you can go to. I don't know what they're called, YMCA too, or I don't know, but there were bunk beds. And so while they were getting ready for bed or just unpacking their stuff, one of the girls screamed, "Ouch, that hurt! Which one of you pinched me?" The others were not even close to her. They accused her of being a drama queen and told her to knock it off, and they thought she was lying. But then another girl felt a very painful pinch. It wasn't just a pinch like, "Hey, I'm messing with you," but pinch like to hurt. And so that painful pinch made the rounds. The girls were screaming. There was chaos, and they were yelling at each other and accusing each other of doing it, even though they were aware of not being close enough to each other to even be able to pinch each other, but yet they felt the painful pinches. They were screaming and hectically looking around, but they could not see anyone that was doing that. There was a mirror in the room, and my coworker's daughter looked into it, just as she was trying to figure out who was pinching her. And she saw a man in the mirror. Now I'm going to show you a picture of, not that man, of course, but the kind of hat he was wearing. Because imagine a 10-year-old girl, doesn't come up with stories like that. That hat was usually worn by ministers or reverends or whatever you want to call it, like a church man, centuries ago. And so she saw him in the mirror, but when she turned, she didn't see him in the room. And and the other girl saw him too. She said, "Guys, look in the mirror, look in the mirror." And they were looking, and that was it for them. They stormed downstairs where the chaperones and group leader was, and they told them the story, only nobody believed them. Like teachers are like, come on, let's all settle down for the night and, don't tell stories. And so they were forced to go back up to the room and go to bed. And so they went back upstairs, scared for their lives, because they didn't know what was next. Painful pinches, and what would be next? Them being killed? They didn't know. And so they left the light on, and hardly any of them got any sleep that night. And the next day, on Sunday morning, they went to another hike, played some games, and tried to convince the group leader, while this was going on, that they were not lying the night before and that it actually happened. But again, the adults told the girls to stop making up stories, and they just didn't believe them. They all ended up packing later on that day and headed back home on the bus that had taken them there. And so this is the story my coworker was telling me on a Monday morning, and she also told me that her younger daughter was not known to ever lie. About small things maybe, but not about important things. And that she was the one out of the two daughters that she had that hated to be the center of attention. So she said, I could see my older daughter telling stories like that, but not my younger one. So her daughter had lost her voice from all that screaming, and she cried because she was worried that that mean man with the strange hat on might have followed them. My coworker said that she would like to check that house out since it was available for renting, over the weekend only, not for long term. And she wanted to go there. She wanted to rent the house, go there and see what was going on. And she asked me if I would join her since she was too scared to go alone. I told her to give me a couple of days because I wanted to think it over and talk to friends and also my husband, the drinker, to see if they wanted to come along, if I decided to come along. I wanted to really think about it because, as you might be able to recall, I had read quite a few books about, things going on behind the veil or things going on in this world that are not explainable with physics, and so I wanted to think about it first. My coworker, the cashier, also knew Bob, that was the manager at the gas station, but she had no idea that he had claimed to have connections to the other side of the veil and that he was talking to his dead son. And so I didn't tell her that I was also planning on talking to him about it. When I went to pick up the bank deposit of the gas station later on that day, I told Bob the whole story. He offered to have his son check into it and get back with me. The next day, Bob told me that his son had gone and checked out that house, and that we should most definitely not even think about renting that house. Decades ago, a minister inhabited that house, and he was dealing with herbology, exorcism, and all kinds of other things that back then could have landed you on the stake. But instead of burning him at the stake, they locked him up in his own basement and let him starve to death. His soul had never found peace, and over the centuries he had turned into a quite nasty piece of work. These are Bob's words. And so if we were to rent that house and provoke that spirit in that way by knowing that he had done something to harm somebody else and just showing up there and trying to communicate with him, let's say via a Ouija board, which is what I told Bob we were planning on doing, he said we would most likely have furniture thrown at us or worse. This is all the information he shared with me about that, but he said definitely do not rent the house. To shorten at least this part of the story, and you knowing a little bit about me, you know that my coworker and I decided to rent that house anyway, and my husband agreed to come. This is going to come up later, but my husband did not believe in things you cannot explain with physics, not at all. And also several friends of ours had agreed to come, and so it was a whole group of us, including my coworker, the cashier, both of her daughters, and some of our friends. Our curiosity was greater than the fear of having a dead minister attack us from beyond the grave. It was exciting, and we were all, psyched. We wanted to do it. It seemed like a nice weekend getaway. The arrangement was to rent that house from Saturday morning to Sunday afternoon, so one stay over. And most of us looked at it as a fun weekend getaway, even though I had read enough books about this kind of stuff to be painfully aware that there was a realistic chance for the whole experience to turn into a nightmare. But back then we were all into drinking and like light-minded. Like none of us had kids except for my coworker. And so we rented the house. We loaded the cars up with booze, food, blankets, pillows, and games for the girls, and of course some clothes and personal hygiene items because we were going to spend the night. Um, yeah, and when I say cars, I mean we went there in 4 cars. Me in my car, and I wanted to have my coworker's younger daughter in the car with me. It was like I said, 30-minute drive, because I wanted to talk to her. I had not talked to her about this, but I'd only heard about it from my coworker. And so this was the first chance I got to talk to her daughter about what she had experienced at that house. The second car was my coworker and her older daughter. And see, none of us really had big cars or vans or trucks or whatever. And so with the blankets we were bringing and, like pillows and stuff, you got to figure that space in too. And so my coworker was driving a rather small car, so she had her the older daughter in the passenger seat, and she had the bag full of, blankets and games and stuff. The third car was my husband in a car with our friends. And another friend came in his car, so it was 4 cars in which we drove to that house. On the entire way there, I was talking to my coworker's younger daughter, who was the one that had been pinched repeatedly by the invisible man when she was there with her youth club weeks prior to that. She seemed sincere, answered all of my questions patiently, and kept affirming that she would never make up a story like this and that we're gonna see that she's not lying. That alone gave me the chills. Her saying it like that. When we arrived at the house Saturday morning, the whole house smelled like sage. Now this, I mentioned it earlier, this house was next to a church, but it wasn't used as a rectory. I don't know if that's the right word. Let me know if it's the right word I'm using. But it wasn't used as such anymore. They were renting it out. So when we arrived at the house smelled like sage, which was strange. It's, in case you're Roman Catholic and you've ever been to a Roman Catholic church service, it's the way it smells then, when you're in the middle of a service. The smoky stuff they have, like in a little container, and the smoke comes out, and then the whole church smells like it. That's what it smells like in that house. We brought in our stuff and did a tour through the house. Everything seemed normal, but I had a little bit of a strange feeling, but I didn't know if it was caused by the energies in that house or actually me being scared of what was about to happen, because being pinched really hard is not a pleasant experience, especially when you cannot stop it since you don't see who's doing it. Co-workers' daughters aged 10 and 13 were playing outside, and we started grilling and drinking alcohol. I didn't drink all that much because I wanted to be relatively clear-minded when we start the attempted contacting of that spirit that apparently was in that house. My first husband, of course, the one that doesn't believe in spirits or paranormal phenomenon, got carried away with the drinking, and so he was drunk in no time. He made all kinds of ghost mocking remarks and jokes, and he was just a nuisance. I remember that from that day. But he didn't believe in that kind of stuff, and so he couldn't believe that he was spending a weekend at a house where apparently some girls were or had been pinched. I had also told him about what Bob told me about what his son said about the spirit inhabiting that house, and he said it's all BS. It's all, he can't believe it, and it's all BS. It's all made up. It made no sense to him. We wanted to wait until the sun had set to do our spirit summoning procedure. Our friend had forgotten to bring his Ouija board, the most important item of them all, right? But we didn't want to drive back 30 minutes and then 30 minutes back to the house. It would have been an hour wasted. And so we had to find stuff to improvise with. At night we went into one of the conference rooms where there was a large round table that seated us all. We had written the alphabet on small pieces of paper, as well as the numbers and the words yes, no, and maybe. A friend of ours volunteered to do the talking because he had been reading similar books as me about, ghosts, spirits, haunted houses in England, haunted castles and stuff like that. We used a drinking glass, as an object we would all put one of our fingers on. Because apparently this is how you do that, or at least if you don't have a Ouija board, each one of you putting one finger on the item so that your energy kind of gives the spirit the strength to move the glass, something like that, I don't know. And so the session began. My friend said the one that knew a little bit about summoning ghosts or spirits. Okay, I gotta tell you that. When he told me about his experiences with that kind of stuff, he told me that he had been part of a spirit summoning session before. Himself. He didn't just hear about it, but he was part of one. And they were drinking. My friend wasn't drinking, but the others were drinking. And so one of the drunker guys said, "Can you show me the devil?" And the Ouija board went to yes, and then spelled out "go" in front of the door, like go outside, leave the room. And he said, "Yeah, sure, I want to see Satan. This is fun." So he stepped outside, but he was told to close the door also. And when, the guys were waiting for him to scream or to laugh or giggle or whatever, but they didn't hear a sound. And when they opened the door, there was this guy in his early 20s with gray hair, probably like mine, or white hair. This is all I know about that story, and so my friend had been there when that happened. And so he was the one that was talking during our session. My friend said a few words about us calling on spirits that could hear us, but told bad spirits to stay away, since I had told him what had happened in that house and what the reason was for us being there. And I had also told him what Bob had told me about the spirit. His first question was, "Is anyone here?" And the glass just sped over, like fast, not just moving slowly, but fast, went over to yes. And it felt aggressive to me. I had my finger on that glass too. And so as soon as that glass moved that fast, we started, we all removed our fingers, which you're not supposed to do either, but I didn't know at the time. But we all were yelling at each other, trying to find out who had moved the glass, but nobody admitted it. Since we all wanted to see what would happen next, we put our fingers back on the glass and agreed to continue. My friend asked, "Are you the one that pinched the children?" Again, the glass just slid over to the word yes. And I also want to mention here that during that session, all of a sudden that room, when we got there, the house had smelled like sage. And during this, and we had aired out the house because we all didn't enjoy the smell. And so it was a nice day, and the kids were playing, and and we were grilling out back. The cars were out front, by the way. This is going to come into play later. But we had aired out the house, and so it made no sense that in the middle of the session, after the first question, it started smelling like sage in that room again. So my friend asked, "Are you the one that pinched the children?" And again, the glass went straight to yes. Another big discussion started about who was moving the glass this time, and we were like scared and angry at the same time. It's something you cannot explain how it happened, and so it confuses people, and they want explanations. The next question was, do you live here? And again, the glass moved to yes right away. Of course, after each answer, we would move the glass back to the middle of the circle in which we had put the alphabet and the words yes, no, and maybe, and the numbers. Yeah, we had put them in a circle because we had written down the alphabet and everything on pieces of paper as opposed to having a Ouija board that the glass could move on. The next question was, are you dead? And again, the glass went straight to yes. And the next question was, are you going to harm us? And the glass shot clean across the table to the word maybe. That was it for me. I said, this is BS. We're here to help him, and he wants to be a jerk about it. Without ending the session properly, I got up. I had had enough. I was scared and confused and angry at the same time. I didn't want no more part of this, even though it was the reason why we were all there. And the others got up too, and we started packing. I was so scared at that point that I simply couldn't risk anything else unexplainable happening that night. We all got our stuff together and decided to not spend the night there. We all agreed on that. And even though we had rented the house for the entire weekend. When we got to our cars, which were parked out front, and we had spent most of the day inside the house or out back where we were grilling, my car stereo was on full blast, which I never do because I have ADD and I'm sensitive to noises and stuff, so I hardly ever listen to really loud music, and I didn't at the time. And also remember that on the entire way to that house, on the entire drive, I had been talking to my coworker's daughter to see if she would admit to having lied. And so I was 100% sure that we had not been listening to music in my car. Our friend's car wouldn't start because his headlights were on. Now, this was during a time where the headlights were not automatically on when you started the engine. There was a lot more, not depending on electronics at the time, or the cars were not that user-friendly. And so since we had driven there in the morning, and not in the early morning, he didn't have his driving lights on, but they were on. And so his battery was dead. My co-worker's car started, but the tank needle was on empty, even though she had filled up on the way between our hometown city and the destination, which was only a 30-minute drive. So there was no call for her tank needle showing that the tank was empty. All of this made us even more determined to not spend the night there. We jump-started the car with the dead battery, and I told my co-worker to drive ahead of me just in case she had actually lost gas on the way there. But we had checked and there were no fluids under her car. But there was still a chance that she could have lost all that gas on the way there, and it was no, because then she couldn't have pulled into the parking lot. Well, it was all strange anyway. Since my friend who had been asking the questions during the session insisted that we needed to destroy the glass since we had not properly ended the session, and we didn't want to chance bringing that spirit home with us, I volunteered to take the glass and destroy it. My husband was driving my car. He had gotten there in our friend's car on the way there. My husband was driving my car, so I was in the passenger seat and I had the glass in my hand on the way back. As soon as we hit the highway, I opened my window all the way and I threw the glass up into the air and aimed for it, so out of the passenger side window, imagine, right? I threw the glass up into the air and aimed for it to go behind the car so that it doesn't hit the roof of the car. I wouldn't have thrown it forward. I threw it backwards, but up. Um, so that it right, so that it would afford to go behind the moving car, which made sense. My friend, the one that had been talking during the session, was sitting in the back seat of our car, and he saw the glass hitting the asphalt road, but it did not break, but rather just bounced. We were going about 60 miles an hour. So it just bounced off of the asphalt and landed in the ditch. Now, mind you, we were out in the country, there were no street lights, everything was dark, and we couldn't even see if there were buildings or anything. This is how pitch dark it was. My friend said that the glass needed to be destroyed, and we had to stop the car, go back, find the glass in the dark, in the grass, in ditches, and to make sure that, to destroy it, but he was overruled. Nobody wanted to go back. So we just kept going. We didn't even stop the car when we had the discussion. We had just kept going the entire conversation. And he was overruled. And this is actually what happened. This is what I was talking about when I said paranormal experiences. Because none of this made any sense to me, and we still have no explanation what happened. I never went back, but I wanted to know more about these things. I wanted for somebody maybe to investigate it, but since we didn't have Ghostbusters in my hometown, I called the Department of Parapsychology. Now, at the time, this was about 89, 90, so 1989 or 90. I didn't even have a computer yet, and it wasn't a common thing to have internet at home, right? And so I actually literally had to use a phone book and find out the number to the university in my hometown and ask my way around to find the Department of Parapsychology. And I wanted to ask them, ask them if I could come over and ask them questions about this. But when I called them, I finally reached somebody that answered the phone using their name instead of saying University of blah, 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 the Department of blah, blah, blah. He just answered by using his name, which is a common thing in Germany. And so I said, is this the Department of Parapsychology? And he said, yes, who are you? And I said, well, my name is Sabine. At the time, it was a different last name. My name is Sabina, and we just had this experience, and I would like to see about talking to somebody because this has scared me and infuriated me at the same time, and I just have this curiosity, and I want to find out more. And as if I had not said any of this, he said, are you from the press? And I said, no, I'm not. Like I said, we just rented this house in blah, 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 and this is what happened, and I'm a bit concerned about this, and I would like to find out more. And he hung up. And so I figured, how else could I get in touch with people that know more about this? And so in one of our flea market, I didn't have the money, nor did I think it would make sense that I put an ad in the local newspaper. And so I decided to place an ad in the, miscellaneous section of one of the flea market papers in the region. And I asked if anyone was experienced in parapsychology and ghost summoning or spirit summoning sessions, and I put my home phone number. I swear to God, some of the things I did in my life were really gutsy, meaning I would not do them again. But at the time I did, and so I posted that ad, and someone called me, and he didn't want to reveal any information about himself, but he said, do not openly talk about this. You do not know what you're messing with. And And I got to tell him the story about what had happened in that house, and that we had a ghost summoning session, and he said, "Oh, you for sure you should have broken that glass because you probably had that spirit follow you, because you acknowledged his existence, and you also tried to contact him. He agreed to that contact, to this conversation, and then you just cut him off." And since I told him about what Bob had said too, without mentioning who Bob was, he also so the guy that I was talking to on the phone also said that that should have been your answer, to not go there. And so just finding somebody else that believed in my coworker, just casually corresponding with his dead son, was just a mind-blowing experience for me. And I asked him if he was willing to meet, or if we could talk on the phone more, and he said no. He said no. And so that was the end to that contact. And I also had several things happen after that were strange. And again, I lived with my husband. We didn't have any children. And my husband was always the practical joke kind of a person. He didn't believe in ghosts or spirits or anything that can't be explained with physical laws. And so this one night, I had a nightmare about somebody pressing on my forehead, like pressing down really hard. And so I woke up from it, and I ran into the bathroom to see if there was actually a marking or if I'd just been dreaming about that. And there was a mark of a thumbprint on my forehead, right there in the middle. And I had a headache from it, so I wasn't just dreaming it. I must have been experiencing that, I guess. I still have no explanation for it. And another thing that happened days or weeks after we had been to that house was that in the middle of the night I had to go number 2. My gosh, I don't know, it doesn't happen often, but that night it did. And so I was going number 2 in the middle of the night when I heard a knock, like a persistent knock, with a knuckle on the wooden door, and it just kept knocking, and I thought it was my husband. And so I said, "I'm almost done, relax, I'm almost done." And so I tried to, close things off, and I opened the bathroom door, and my husband wasn't there. And so I ran into, because I figured if he's trying to mess with me again, trying to make me believe that a spirit did that, I, I would have punched him. But I went into our bedroom, and there he was laying as calm as could be. And I even felt his heart rate, because he would do things like, do certain things and just run and pretend to be sleeping, but you cannot pretend your heart's not beating fast from running clean across the apartment, right? And so I felt his heart rate, and his heart rate was normal. It was low, like the one of a person sleeping. And so I'm telling you guys, I still have no explanation for any of this. And I don't work for that company anymore. And so Americans closed most of their posts in Germany. And so I lost touch with Bob, who would be now, 30 years ago. He was in his 50s, 60s. He's probably not even alive anymore. But I never got anybody to confirm, yes, this is what happened, and this is the explanation for it, and you guys were fooled or scammed by somebody, but we were not. Nobody ever benefited from this. And so this is what happened. I might at some point in the future tell you about more things, about a book that I bought books. They didn't have books about ghosts and stuff like that, like books you can learn from, like how to do a spirit session. They didn't have them so much in libraries, because of course they don't want for that knowledge to spread. At least in the 80s and 90s it wasn't so common. And so I bought books about occultism, about witchcraft and all kinds of stuff. I wanted to know more about it. and it turns out it helped me decide what I want to have in my life and what I do not. And so I also had a book about ghosts, and my sister borrowed it from me, and then her, during the time she had it, her light bulbs would go out. Now, if one goes out, that's, you know, you can chalk that off as, okay, I gotta change a light bulb. But it was more than one light bulb going out in her house. And but these things are not worth making a video about. Let's just say sometimes we have things happening to us that we cannot explain. Or another one, I would like to add this one. I had a grandmother on my father's side, and I would spend a lot of time with her after work because she was really cool. She was a cool woman, and she would always say, I don't get the fascination with people buying stuff on credit. Now, she was an adult during the war. I mean, the war that included Hitler, right? She was an adult because my parents were small children at the time. And so my grandmother was a full-blown adult when that with Hitler happened. And so they experienced their houses being destroyed, and the entire city, this city here, was completely bombed. And so so you get the kind of time she was aware in, like, as an adult. And she said, I'm not getting the fascination with everybody wanting to buy things on credit. No, I never did this in my life. I don't think it's right. Everything bought out, everything outright. Everything I own, I bought outright. I did not get credit from the bank, and I don't know why everybody is doing this. And she said that so often. And so this one night, we were still in the same apartment that we lived in when I told you about the knock on the bathroom door and the fingerprint on my forehead. And I wanted to get a loan, because I wanted to buy another car, and we wanted to move to a larger apartment or house. And so I wanted to get a loan from the bank. And in order to do that, I had to get my income paper together, like pay stubs, and list my expenses. And the night I was doing that, my husband was already in bed. He was in the army, and so he had to get up really early in the morning, and I couldn't sleep, and so I was still getting my papers together for the next day, having that appointment at the bank. And all of a sudden the room got so cold. And I learned later in books about, you know, experiencing ghosts or unexplained phenomenon, that when there's a spirit around, the air usually grows cold. Sometimes you can even see your breath. But I had never experienced it myself, which is what I totally forgot telling you guys. This is also what happened at the room when we had the ghost summon or spirit summoning session. It got cold, and it started reeking of sage. It was such a strong smell. So the temperature dropped. I forgot. I'm a bad storyteller, I told you guys. And it reeked of sage. And so when I was getting my paperwork together for the bank appointment the next day, I got really cold. There was like cold air coming onto me that wasn't there before. And I heard my grandma say in my head, never buy anything on credit, save up your money. That was another paranormal experience I had. Okay, but this is it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.